Greetings, comrades. Now, I know it's been a while since I made a video. I've been sick, and then I was traveling, and then there's some other stuff going on right now that I don't want to talk about because I'm kind of superstitious, so maybe I'll tell you about that later. But anyway, I wasn't able to participate in the kids' literature reading thing from ACOS, and I apologize for that because I really wanted to, but I've been sick for weeks, and I'm finally kind of well, and with the traveling and the other stuff, I haven't been reading at all. But I do have some books here that I finished last month that I want to go over with you really quickly. Now, the first one is a middle grade novel here called Tesla's Attic. It's book one of the Accelerati trilogy by Neal Shusterman and Eric Elfman. And this is the book here. Okay, nice cover. About Tesla, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And it's like a middle grade adventure story. This young guy and his family moved to a new town, and there are all these things left over in the attic, and so they held this big garage sale. Well, it turns out that these things once belonged to Tesla, and they have some unusual properties to them. So then him and the friends that he's made have to go around and try and round these things back up. And of course, chaos ensues. So there is the second one in the book is something about Thomas Edison, Edison's attic. Oh no, Tesla's attic, Edison's garage, or something like that. I don't remember what it is, but I'll check it out. It was pretty good. It was just a fun, quick, middle grade adventure read. So if you like that, then I recommend it. The next one is one that's more of a classic. It's called Tom's Midnight Garden. Copyright 1958 is when it was first published. This is English. It's about a young boy whose brother has the measles, so he gets sent away to live with his aunt and uncle. And he and his brother really like playing out in the yard and in the garden and things, and they don't have one there where he's going, or so it seems at first. But then there's this odd clock, and one night the clock strikes 13, and he's like, 13? He goes down, and he looks outside, and there's this garden out the back door, which was not there during the day. And so every night at the same time, he goes out, and he can be there for ages out in the garden, like, all day long, and he comes back in, and almost little or no time has passed back in his world. So it's about his adventures in the garden and him trying to figure out what's going on and things like that. It's a good book. I don't think it would be published today in the way it's written. There's a lot of exposition in the book. It's not a real fast-paced, quick mover kind of book, but it's a nice little story. I'm glad I read it. I don't know that it will go down as one of my favorites, but it was worth reading. So now the third book I have here is called The Red Notebook by Antoine Lorrain. Oh, this is by, Tom's Midnight Garden is by Philippa Pierce. Okay, so The Red Notebook by Antoine Lorrain. Now, Antoine Lorrain is the one who wrote The President's Hat, which I adored. Okay, and you can see they've stuck with the same, very similar kind of style of cover here. This one is not quite as charming, I found, as I didn't think, as The President's Hat, but I loved that book. But this is a good book, and I do recommend it, and it's about a man who... he's out for his morning walk one day, and he sees this lady's handbag lying on top of like a dustbin, a trash can. And it looks very new, and it doesn't, look like it was there to be thrown away. And he kind of thinks, maybe someone might have stolen it. So he picks it up and he looks at it, and sure enough, it's filled with stuff, but there's no identification in there. So he takes it to he goes to the local police station. And this is in Paris, takes place in Paris. Goes to the local police station. They're swamped. They don't have time to deal with them. They said he can sit there for an hour and wait, or tomorrow he can take it to whatever, another place. So he takes it with him and he goes back to work, and he is actually the owner of a bookstore in Paris. So another thing to make the book interesting. But he, at home that night, against his own, ethical, better judgment, he decides to look in the bag and see if he can find out. Maybe there is something else in there that will tell him who it is, and he can just give it back to the person. And there isn't, but he becomes intrigued by what he finds there, and he decides and determines to go and try and find the person himself. So that's what he does, and that's what the story is him trying to find out who this person is, and you find out about her. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Laura, and if you haven't, you need to stop what you're doing right now and go and watch that movie because it's really cool. But this book, in a way, reminded me of that movie. There's just a little sidebar here. In the movie Laura, it's a murder mystery, and the police detective gets called in to investigate the murder of a woman, Laura, and the more he finds out about her, he goes through this investigation, he becomes kind of obsessed with her, and he begins to fall in love with her, because in order to find out who killed her, you need to find out about her. So this book kind of had the same flavor. It's this guy, and he's finding out what he can about this woman to try and find out who is the owner of the handbag, and he just becomes fascinated by all the things he finds out. So anyway, it's a good book. Not quite up as high up on my list as The President's Hat. Not as quite as charming, but it's good. The writing is good, and it's a fun read. So, well, fun may not be the right word, but it's not dark. Okay, it's a good read. Now, and one of the things that I noticed that in this book that I read is that there is a very minor character in here who's an author, because there's a book in the bag, and this author is a really famous author, and it turns out that it is Patrick Modiano, who actually has a bit part in this book. He is a French author, and I should probably be embarrassed to say it, but I'd never heard of him. And I think he actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year in 2014, is my understanding. And so I decided to get one and read it based on what was said about him in the Red Notebook. And he's French, he's a Paris writer, and I was curious. So I got this book called, the English title on here is called Missing Person. I think it's something completely, that's not even a literal translation, I think. Oh, yeah. Rue des Boutiques Obscures, which I'm sure is slaughtered as far as which sounds like obscure shops to me rather than missing persons is what the translation would be. Or obscure streets. I don't know. Obscure street of the shops. I have no idea because I don't speak French. I'm only guessing. But anyway, that's what it's called in French. And I apologize for all of the foregoing. But anyway, this is a book about a guy who, it takes place about 10 years after World War II ends. And he is working at a detective agency for a man who is now retiring. He's going to kind of close the agency down, and he's going to go off and retire. And this guy has amnesia, and he doesn't know who he is. And this detective guy kind of took him in. He now finally has come across something to give a clue that he can follow to start investigating about who he is. And it's fine. The writing is fine. The story was interesting but not intriguing in any way. I wasn't overly emotionally invested in the main character. I think one of the things I was really hoping for when I read this was more, but I was hoping for more of a sense of ambiance, a sense of place, about taking place in Paris. There are a couple of other French authors that I read a few books of. Well, Georges Simenon and Pierre Magnan, Magnon, who both write murder mysteries, and who both have a very strong sense of place. Even Simenon, whose books are so small, they're police procedurals, and they just kind of go right along. They're not real thick novels or anything, but you certainly get a sense of place, and it's not the prettified, touristy storefront kind of Paris and France, or Provence is what the other guy writes about, that you see. This is the grittier, side, so to speak. And I was kind of hoping for it with this author too, and I did not have that with him. He just doesn't, it pretty much could have taken place anywhere. But the writing is good, and it's good enough for me to try another one of his books and see. And maybe this, I tried it because it was small, and it was available at the library, and I'll give him another shot, though. Maybe about some other things and see. Now, the next book here is about another bookshop owner called The Bookshop by Penelope Fitzgerald. I'd never read anything by Penelope Fitzgerald, and this is about a woman who has retired or is widowed, I'm not sure, and she goes back to a town. She goes back, I think it's where she originally grew up or was born or something, and she decides to open up a bookshop. She says, by making a success of a business so impractical, she invites the hostility of the town's less prosperous shopkeepers. You know, and it ends up being actually a fairly depressing book. It was okay, the writing is good, but it was depressing. So, at your own risk. But I will try another Penelope Fitzgerald book because she, the writing was good. I think that just wasn't a particularly uplifting story. And the last one here is, of all of these books, this one is probably my favorite, and it is a elementary or middle grade novel called A Tangle of Knots. Read this book. If you read children's books at all, read this book. This book was great. I absolutely loved it. It takes place in, I guess you could call it kind of an alternate world. In this world, it takes place in the U.S. I think it's in the U.S. Yeah, and in this world, everyone has a special talent, and that's talent with a capital T. And it could be anything. Like there's one character that comes and goes in the book, and is mentioned in the book. His talent is whistling. He can whistle like nobody else alive, right? One of the characters has talent for knitting. She can knit a scarf on her way to work. Done. Boom. Out. One guy can float about 2 inches off the ground. So the story starts out there mostly around a couple of young girls. One of them, her talent is knowing the perfect cake for someone. She bakes. She's young. She's only like 9 or something like that, I think. 10. I don't know. And maybe a little older. But she bakes, and she can look at someone and talk to them for a minute and know what their perfect cake would be. And she lives in an orphanage, actually, and never gets adopted. I mean, I think she's been adopted a couple of times, but they bring her back. It just doesn't work. And she's not a bad kid or anything, so you don't really know why it doesn't work out. It's just not the right fit. And the woman who runs the orphanage, her talent is kind of like finding the right person for kids, because they hardly ever stay at her orphanage at all. And then there's another young girl in the story who doesn't know what her talent is. It hasn't manifested itself, and there's no particular age. Some people have it from when they're born. This girl's mother didn't have hers manifest until she was like in her 20s. So she's constantly trying things out to see if that's her talent, because she really, really, really wants to have a talent, right? And she doesn't know what it is, right? Now, there are, of course, some nefarious types that are involved in this. The chapters are very short, and each one is about a person, and there are multiple chapters about, there are probably 8 or 10 main characters here, and each one has multiple chapters, and it trots right along there. It doesn't, it doesn't, like, keep you guessing, But it doesn't come across as choppy, either. I didn't find that at all. I found it to be very well done. As far as stories going from here to there, you get the overall story. And a bunch of these several people, due to circumstances, all kind of end up in one place and having to deal with each other. It was a lot of fun. I really liked this book a lot. This is a book that I'm actually going to read again, and I almost never read books. So this may end up being one of my favorites. This may go on my all-time favorite list. So I highly recommend this book, A Tangle of Knots. It's by Lisa Graff, Graff. Yeah, check this one out. This is the best one of all the books I've read, of all the Nobel Prize winners and high literary art books. This was my favorite. Okay, so that's my wraps and recs for this time. Hopefully it won't be so long before I can make another video, and I'll keep you posted about what's going on with other things too as things transpire. Fingers crossed. All right. So that's it for now. Happy trails and happy reading.